I'm excited to connect and learn more about you because you are a part of a world that I really don't know much about. You are one of the top streamers in the world. And we were just talking about this off camera about how not everyone, but sometimes people that come on and watch streaming, they experience loneliness, sadness. They feel like maybe misunderstood or people don't get them. And they find a way to connect with other streamers in things that they like, gaming and things like that. I'm curious, did you ever feel alone yourself growing up? And did you ever feel alone while you were streaming to millions of people?
Well, twofold question, so twofold answer. For starters, growing up, I feel like I was lucky in the sense that I'm a very extroverted person. I love to talk to people. I find great interest in other human beings. So it's very easy for me to talk to others. But I felt it was very, very difficult to feel like I belong anywhere.
Really?
Absolutely. And I think that's something that I've struggled with, frankly, most of my life, even though I have good friends. So I think, I learned a bit more about this sentiment year over year, and I found that a large part of that, especially growing up, was due to my upbringing being very different than my friends, because I immigrated to Canada at the age of 4. Well, my family did, brought me along. And I grew up in a more cultural, religious, strict household than most of my friends did. So things like staying out late, sleepovers with boys, going on trips, those were not things that I was really allowed to do or were common practice for us. And so I'd find myself kind of going to school and having some friends and getting along, but not necessarily relating on a very deep or fundamental basis. And I also missed out on a lot of the bonding experiences that they might have been able to have that I wasn't allowed to experience. And frankly, sometimes being culturally different from people and not finding many people similar to you makes it hard. You want to fit in, but you, in a sense, will never be able to, because no matter how hard you try to be like another group per se, you can never fully become that, and you always end up being somewhere in the middle. Yes, so I also feel like my whole life I've had this sentiment of being very indebted to my parents for the sacrifices that they've made, and that's just not something that someone can really relate to, especially when you're in middle school, you're in high school.
Right.
You're like, what do you mean? Some kids are just like, what do you mean? Your whole life is about making your parents proud. You just maybe don't get it. So yeah, I think that's what personally made me feel lonely initially, but I found so much solace and comfort in bonding over gaming with people online, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, fitting in and belonging, what's the difference for you in terms of fitting in versus belonging?
Actually, that's a great question. I think fitting in is being socially acceptable. It's I walk and talk the part. I am easily digestible to others, but belonging is more so the people around me understand me to my core, to my soul. They get where I'm from. They understand your decision making, your purpose in life. That's more so belonging. And I am lucky enough to have built at this point in my life some really deep friendships where when I'm around these people, I feel like I belong. I think another part of that is there is such a cultural and racial aspect to belonging. When people around you don't talk or look like you or come from a background like you, it's hard to feel like you belong.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how did you learn to fit in and belong in the streaming world when maybe not everything in the streaming world or the gaming world also fits into your cultural values?
Yeah. Oh my. I think for all content creators, it's a bit of a trial and error process. And I think to some extent, we're all a little bit people pleasers,
Well, especially if you're streaming, it's about getting eyeballs and attention. And
yeah.
they
And
like
you
this, I
wanna
need to
make
do
it-
more of this.
Exactly. It's a lot about it's just a feedback loop. And you want to make that feedback loop as positive as possible. initially at least, right? You're just like, oh, I think I'm doing the right thing.
Especially if you're trying to make it a career and a business and make money and survive.
How do I optimize those positive reactions? But sometimes, somewhere along that path, you start thinking, wait, am I even enjoying what I'm doing? Am I losing touch of what I want to do versus what I know my audience wants me to do?
Did you ever feel that way?
Of course.
Really?
I'd assume most content creators do at some point. I do think luckily for a lot of my career, it was just so exciting that I didn't think too much about that until someday you burn out and you're like, hold up, let's take it back a couple steps and reevaluate. And since then, I've just come to view it more so as you need almost like a Venn diagram. What do people want from me? What do I want to do? Let's make sure I'm focusing on what I want to do. And maybe that middle part are the things that you do the most.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, I saw on your YouTube, you talked about kind of hitting a wall, taking a break, reevaluating your process. Did you feel like you really burnt out hard? Or was it more just a moment of like, okay, I need to reimagine what I'm doing and why I'm doing this?
Probably both.
Really?
I think as privileged of a career and lifestyle as content creation is, I think especially when you're trying to optimize it, it's very like go, go, go. And I think most people experience burnout at some point. You kind of just push through it. I would say every year or two, you just try to push through it, find motivation somehow, try something new, whatever it is, right? But this time around, or the last time I felt this way, I realized like there was something deep within me that just yearned for something different.
Really?
Yes.
So before, years ago, you were like, okay, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed and stressed and tired, and I keep showing up, and part of it's fun, but it's kind of draining, and you would push through. But this last time, you're like, I need to completely reinvent.
Yeah. And that was a very difficult decision to make. Even filming that video, I was like tearing up. Yes, so many aspects to go into, but
why was it so hard to make that decision?
I think any time that it's hard enough to find something that works for you, right? I feel like we spend our whole lives trying to figure out what's going to work for me. And then imagine finding that, and a few years into it, you feel like it's not for you anymore, maybe. Or you feel like your heart yearns for more. I feel like there's no other way for me to really summarize that sentiment. And I mean, there were just so many aspects to that decision, whether it's like financially or the people that rely on me. I decided to like pay for my parents' retirement. I work with so many people whose incomes rely on me. Any change that I make to my business structure, even though as a person, I may just look like a person making content, there are so many other people that I should consider. And my audience, right? Obviously, there are people that I want to make happy. And I feel like this constant desire to make people proud. And I'm like, what if this doesn't feel like the right choice for other people? But it was something I had to do for myself. And I just keep hoping that as long as I try to optimize for my happiness and health, that will allow me to output the best stuff that I can over my whole lifetime, whatever that will end up being.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you were doing, before you made this decision, this was what, like last year or like the last?
This was like 8 months.
8 months ago, yeah. So you took a pause, right? You took a break.
Yes.
And how long was that pause?
That was about a month.
month,
So every 2 years or so, I'm like, I'm going to go insane. I'm so lucky to be able to take a month off.
Sure.
But yeah, it's because the rest of the year, it's like
now before then,
nonstop.
Were you like streaming every day, a certain amount of hours or 5 days a week? Or what did that look like?
Yeah, so I probably started off like 6 days a week, at least 6 hours.
6 hours a day.
Yeah.
Streaming your content.
That might sound weird to you. I know, being in front of like a computer talking for 6 hours every day. Yeah, but to me, I was like, that's not enough. And I even had a manager at some point who was like, no, you need to do like 10 plus hours every day.
Wow.
And I was like, I kid you not, my brain will melt.
And so you're playing video games and you're talking for 6 hours a day.
I know that sounds like not much, but you feel like you have to be so on that whole time talking to people.
Yeah, it's a lot of energy.
And I do feel like every streamer is a bit different. You know, some people are like, I'm just going to chill and play my game. And I feel like maybe that's like more sustainable or easier to do even like 10, 12 hours in a day. But for me, I literally not stop talking the entire 6 hours. And I end up being pretty tired after, but then you want to film some YouTube videos, you want
Wow.
to take photos. And I'm someone who, honestly, out of everything, I love the business aspect of being a content creator. I've helped co-found an organization. I co-founded a management agency and consultation brand. I work with a clothing company. I just love doing all of these little things on the side. So it's many streams of income, many projects, many everythings all at once, which is fun, but sometimes it gets a little overwhelming
Sure.
too. Yeah.
What are the top 3 revenue streams that most streamers make from? Is it live streaming? Is it sponsorships and ads? Is it selling your own products? What else is there?
I would say primarily streaming. And when you stream, you have like subscription revenue. If people subscribe to you, that's like a fee every month. And then you also have ad revenue and donations as well. If people want to send in money. Yeah. But I feel like at some point in your career, it's like you don't want to accept too much in donations. So I've personally like capped mine. So,
Why don't you accept donations?
well, I'll cap it at like $2 or $5. I think that's my cap because it just started feeling wrong to take money from people. You know, when I was like a college student in debt,
You're like, oh,
I was
50
so
bucks,
grateful.
yes.
Yeah, it was so nice. And it made such a huge difference in my life. But once you get to a certain point in, again, like very grateful, very privileged, but like financial stability, you're like, the likelihood is that this person might need the money more than me. Like even $20, send me 2 instead, not 20. Keep the rest for yourself. So it's like I keep that interaction without, I don't want to cause financial strain on anyone.
Sure.
So that, sponsorships for sure. And probably like YouTube ad revenue.
Right. Those are the main revenue streams, the top revenue streams for you.
Yes.
Gotcha. Now, how did you deal with self-image and self-confidence when you're staring, maybe not looking at yourself the whole time, but you're on a screen and you can see part of yourself for 6 hours a day, some people 10 hours a day. You've got probably tens of thousands of comments coming throughout this time.
Yep.
I'm assuming tens of thousands of live viewers at different times, if not more, and money coming in, and also positive comments and negative comments. How do you stick true to your family values while also staring at yourself and having to be, a personal brand and put yourself together and be on camera and photos and play a character in a sense sometimes to an audience? How do you manage that?
That's a great question because I don't feel like a lot of people even consider that aspect of it. Obviously it looks very fun. You play games, you make videos for a living, and it is really, really fun. But when you look at it from that angle, especially from that of a female streamer, it's like you do get constant comments on your appearance, and there's simply no way to not process or be impacted by that mentally, right? Personally, I try to take as, I guess, reasonable and realistic of an approach as I can, which is like, if I know that this is a part of my day-to-day, I need to minimize the negative aspects, right? That means one, having moderators who will remove like the really annoying or weird stuff.
Spammy stuff.
Or the negative comments, even filtering out certain words is very, very helpful. And secondly, I try to spend so much time offline or honestly undoing the downsides of just being chronically online,
Really?
frankly. Yes. And when those kinds of things get too hard, therapy. And frankly, the most difficult times in my career, or the times where I'm most unsure of myself, I try to ask myself, like, if I try to imagine myself like 5 or 10 years younger, watching me, how could I make this person proud?
That's
You
cool.
know? How can I maybe positively influence them in the decisions that I make, the things that I do or say? what is something that could like enrich someone's soul? Because I think you can very easily just start like focusing entirely on like how you look or optimizing for that. But is that like the right message that I want to send to my female viewers or people who might not feel the best about themselves? So I try to be considerate of all of those things.
That's good.
But especially therapy.
When did you start going to therapy, and what was the biggest lesson that you've learned in therapy?
I actually feel like I started going almost as soon as I moved to LA.
Really?
Yeah. As soon as I started feeling like, oh, this is just getting to be a lot.
What's getting to be a lot?
Oh, well, at the time I lived with other content creators.
Oh man, so it's nonstop all day. All day, all
At
night,
some point-
streaming.
Yeah, it felt like I was in like a reality TV show.
You kind of were. An online reality show, live streaming.
Yeah, kind of fun, but kind of mentally overwhelming. And I was like, how do I keep my sanity intact? And I just try to be very considerate of how I'm being influenced in a way, right? So I started going to therapy then, and it was really nice because it felt, how do I say this? It felt like it was like, yeah, just keeping me sane a little bit, like a way to take care of my brain and calm it down. I think the thing that I learned, or the thing that comes to mind when you ask me that question, is my current therapist now at one point told me like, hey, the rate that you're going at, I don't think there's any way for you to continue this lifestyle and this, like at this rate without needing consistent therapy.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
This was maybe like a year ago. And that was very helpful for me to realize, like I was getting so frustrated with some of the issues that I was experiencing, that I realized like for me to stop winding up in the same place, I need to make big changes.
Right.
You want to see big change? Make big changes, kind of thing.
What were the biggest frustrations you were facing?
Some of the like just some of the harassment you get online, or not just you in general. I'm very cognizant that if you put yourself out there, there's going to be negativity, right?
You're opening yourself up to
Yes,
all types of comments.
1000%.
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel like I have pretty thick skin. I grew up with an older brother. We fought all the time. I've played video games my whole life. So, like, I get it, right? But even all those things considered, being a female in a male-dominated space, there were just certain things that I was dealing with that were getting to be too much and too cyclical.
Really?
It felt like every 3 to 4 months, it was like some crisis, some big thing that was like really impeding my life.
Really?
Yeah.
What types of crisis? Is it like stalkers? Is this like...
Sometimes it's like other content creators like having some sort of like hate campaign against you,
Really?
or like farming you for views,
Like
kind
a
of.
bully campaign almost.
Yeah, I hate to say that. And like, you know, at the end of the day, I'm putting myself out there, but it became very evident that the way that I was being treated in the past was very different than my male counterparts.
Really?
And that was very frustrating. Luckily, that has improved like year over year, I would say, but was difficult to deal with at certain points in my career. Yeah.
What advice do you have to young individuals watching or listening who struggle with criticism, rejection, the opinions of other people? How have you learned to overcome those opinions, to not let it affect your self-value and self-worth?
I think for starters, just accepting that statistically, there's going to be a % of people that don't like you. That's okay. That's life. Do you like everybody you've ever met? No, right? So don't worry about it too much, right? Some level of criticism, of distaste is to be accepted and is completely normal. Secondly, take advice from people that you look up to. Because, you know, some of the things random people online say to me, I'm like, I'm sorry, you don't have the qualifications to comment on that,
Right.
frankly, which is kind of funny. And lastly, this one is a bit more specific. Like when you're dealing with criticisms that are solely tied to something that is outside of your control, whether that's like how you look or your gender, your race, any of these things that are much more personal and frankly unfair, from my experience, it is best to find validation and reassurance from like-minded people. The support I got from other female streamers and women in the space is like the sole thing that kept me like pushing through. So that's so helpful.
That's great. What are the advantages and disadvantages that women have in the online streaming gaming space versus men? Advantages and disadvantages in the same space.
I'd say advantage is like sometimes, I don't know if minority is the right word to use in this case, but I guess it is. Sometimes being a minority helps you almost like stand out in a way as a content creator when there's something that differentiates you from everyone else, right? If you see 100 people and they're kind of similar, or like even if they're like the same gender and then there's one girl, you're like, oh, at least like your eye is kind of drawn there, like this is different, right? So maybe that's an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage because then people will use that attribute to maybe pick on you or treat you differently. Yeah, that's the main thing. I mean, I don't know if you know much about gaming, but it's pretty well known that like there's a hint of misogyny here and there. I don't like to talk about it too much. It's like a bit of a tired topic, but it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
Luckily, I feel like there is more variety in the gaming community year over year. The pandemic brought a lot of eyeballs into this industry a lot as well. So yeah, it's improved a lot. I think it's very important to, one, be wary of who you follow. Are you diversifying who you follow? Are you following them because of how they look, because of what they say? What are the reasons for that? And are those reasons good? And then two, I just implore people to spend more time in real life, frankly.
Yeah.